SBN, Sports Business Now. SBN is a division of Row 27, the digital sports marketing company, celebrating 5 years of creating TV spots, intro videos, and microsites for over 150 teams. See our work at row27.com. And by FanMaker, digital marketing tools for sports teams, featuring FanMaker Rewards, the most comprehensive and popular fan loyalty and reward system. Learn more about our apps at fanmaker.com. SBN Live.
Hey sports fans, welcome to SBN Live episode 34, where sports marketing and technology meet. My name is Max Huber, I'm your host today, and I'm proud to be joined by Juan Pablo de la Roca of the Mexican Ski and Snowboard Federation, among other things. Juan, how's life going today? I want to thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. Glad to be here. Things are great. I'm about 24 hours away from start getting on the road. Going to be heading down to New Zealand this weekend, funny enough, for a World Cup qualifier for the Olympics. So today I'm just kind of wrapping up loose ends here in Denver before being gone for a little while.
Very cool. Well, I mentioned Juan is with the Mexican Ski and Snowboard Federation. So, we've had you on before, Juan, but just for anybody who may not have seen that episode, give us a little history on the Mexican Ski and Snowboard Federation and some of your goals moving forward as a group.
Okay. Yeah. The Mexican Ski and Snow Federation is actually the governing body for snow sports in Mexico. The country of Mexico has actually sent a contingency to the Winter Olympics as far back as 1928. It was a bobsled team, but there had never really been any sort of ski, especially no snowboard, up until 1980. At that point, there was a gentleman who was of German descent. His family was the ones that actually started the Puebla VW factory, where they were producing the bugs up until about 2002, I believe it was something like that. So he was somebody who, by obviously of means, who was able to spend a lot of time in Europe, was training, was skiing quite a bit, and saw an opportunity because he had the dual nationality start up a ski team for Mexico. So since 1980, there's been a ski team. It's not been, very deep beyond just half a dozen skiers at the most. I think the most skiers they sent was either in 88 or 92, something like that. But what ended up happening was in 2010, they actually only had one skier representing, and believe it or not, he was 52 years old. And it was actually the same guy who started it in 1980.
Oh, really?
So there was a need to, obviously align with a younger athlete, and snowboarding was identified as an opportunity to do that. So in the spring of 2011, there was a gentleman who is essentially, he's the director of the Mexican Ski and Snowboard Federation. His name is Carlos Pruneda. He was in Vail, and I had, prior to that, had written a report on Hispanics in action sports, and specifically looking at what was going to happen to the industry from a financial business standpoint in the next several years. And this was back in 2010. And through that, I had some, a lot of connections in the snowboard industry, people who kind of saw me as being the expert, as the person who knew what was coming down the pike in terms of demographic shifts and its effect on the industry. So through that, I had a friend of mine up in Edwards, outside of Vail, who contacted me. He was like, hey, by the way, there's this guy here right now. He's doing tryouts. He needs to find some kids he wants to take to the Winter Youth Olympics. It's going to be in Innsbruck, Austria, and that was going to be in January of 2012. And so I was really intrigued by it. We actually connected on that trip that he was out here for, and it was at the airport. We struck up a friendship, and over a year's worth of time, we exchanged a lot of information. We're talking about a lot of possibilities if this program were to roll out. And then in the spring of 2012, he came back out, and he was essentially he's like, look, I don't know anything about snowboarding, but you seem to know quite a bit about it. Why don't you run the program? And at that point, I was like, well, how do you say no to that? So that's how I find myself now being a part of this Snowboard Federation for Mexico.
Very cool. You mentioned the 1992 Winter Olympics or so. Mexico sent 20 athletes to those games in France, 8 of them in downhill skiing. And like you mentioned, the German individual who kind of got the whole thing started was along on that. So hopefully, we see bigger and better things from Mexico moving forward, and you're going to be a big part of that. So you also mentioned that you're going down to New Zealand soon. All of us here in the office are jealous because we're stuck in Minnesota. But tell us about some of these events that you're doing, these World Cup qualifiers. Maybe touch on a couple on where you've been, where you've brought some of these Mexican athletes to, and where you're going.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I'm actually really amazed at how far along we've gotten. I mean, considering that this really started in 2012, to find ourselves right now in a position to qualify an athlete in snowboarding for these next 2014 games is pretty amazing. This will be now our 4th World Cup that we'll be participating in. So the way it works for the Olympics is FIS, Federation International Ski, is in charge of all the competitions for qualifying for the Olympics. What you have to do to get in is get a top 30 finish in one of these World Cup events, and then also accrue a total of 50 FIS points. So far, again, we've done 3, but though technically they were 2. So we were in Colorado. Obviously, we live here, so that one's a really easy one for us to participate in. But last January, there was a World Cup qualifier at Copper Mountain. Sandra, who's our athlete, came in 44th at that event. And there was a total of about 65, 70 riders present. Our next trip was actually in Europe back in March. We were in the Czech Republic. We did a little training in Germany, and then also did another comp in Spain. However, we had some weather issues in Spain, so it wasn't a very successful trip from either a point standpoint or actually even a qualifier, because we weren't able to compete in the event. So this next one is the first start. Actually, it's the start of every winter. They'll do a competition typically in the Southern Hemisphere, whether that be Chile or New Zealand. New Zealand typically gets the nod because they actually hold snow really well down there. They have a lot of really good facilities as well. So this kind of kicks off the FIS season every year. And this one's a really big one, of course, because we're less than 6 months out from the Olympics. So we expect to see a pretty deep field. Obviously, Mexico is not a traditional winter Olympic contingency, but you'll definitely see a lot of the European, North American, Canadian, United States athletes down there as well. So we have, even if we don't get a chance here at this next competition, there'll be a total of 2 more opportunities after New Zealand. There'll be another opportunity at Copper in December, and then Austria in January. But, we'd love to get this over and done with, and at least know that we're going to be in the Olympics for 2014. They've actually already even qualified a skier, and they're getting really close on a luge athlete as well. So,
very cool. Well, that'll be a weight off of not only your shoulders, but the entire Mexican Olympic Committee. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've been super supportive. They're really not wanting to put any sort of effort behind athletes that don't have a legitimate shot at getting into the games. And the athlete, going back, it's kind of funny. I went to Argentina in 2010 on a personal snowboard trip. I met a gentleman who's a photographer on the East Coast for a lot of snowboard publications. And he would go out to Mount Hood every summer, and he was like out there, I don't know, this was a year ago, and he was hanging out with one of the coaches. And she was like, I'd love to go represent Mexico in snowboarding. And he was like, well, you know what? I actually know the guy who can put you in a position to do that. And that's how that whole thing kind of came about. So,
well, cool. If the weather holds up the way that it's been going here in Minnesota, you're going to be able to hold a World Cup event here very soon, as it's only August, but the temperature has been dropping steadily. So, but like I mentioned, our show is about sports marketing and technology. So are there any technology pieces that you as a group use for the Mexican Ski and Snowboard Federation? I know that personally you and I were talking beforehand, and you use Alpine Replay, which is kind of a media tool to document skis as you're going down the slope. It'll get telemetry, all that kind of nonsense. But that seemed like a pretty cool thing that you guys have used. I don't know if you use this for some of the athletes, or if there's anything else that you use to, for athlete evaluation and for training mechanisms.
It's I definitely use them on a personal level. Well, for one, I'm a consultant in the sports marketing industry, so I use a lot of tools to talk about things that I'm working on. So I would say the most concentrated effort has been on that level. Anything from a Tumblr, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that kind of stuff for sure. And also using it to communicate with the athletes that I do work with as well. I mean, you got to remember we're a really small squad right now. It's only about 3 athletes altogether. 2 of them are really young still. But it's definitely been a very top of mind for me, especially as we approach the Olympics. Should we get in the Olympics, there's going to be a sizable we're already starting to see some sizable media interest within Mexico. So you look at how you engage with the Hispanic market in the U.S., technology will definitely be a very big piece of it all. It's one of those things where you can access people's, cultural networks in terms of communicating, sharing ideas, promoting the idea of the sport of snowboarding as well is going to be very appealing. I think, one of the interesting technology tools that we could probably, fit into this conversation as well that kind of shows how snow sports have really embraced technology is the whole Epic Mix that Vail Resorts rolled out a few years ago. Okay. I sat in on a panel last year for International Research Symposium with the Snow Sports Industry of America, and that was very much talked about how the social media platforms have just changed snow sports in terms of communication and consumer engagement. And now as we talk about an era in which snow sports are going to have to expand beyond who they've traditionally seen as their core consumer and start embracing, other segments of the marketplace, throw in the story aspect of Mexico sending an athlete. There will be some very interesting things that can be rolled out on digital technology, for sure.
Very cool. I mean, there's so much stuff out there, and whether that's, and we've talked about on the show using Google Glasses just to get their perspective, whether it's, for the athlete training. But, especially if you guys get some athletes into the Olympics and this downhill skiing, the stories that are going to be on the news all around the world, it's going to be huge. And then using those social media outlets that you guys do have, it'll be great to get the story out there and to see how much it can spread. So I'm excited about that for you guys and to see what happens at the upcoming FIS event down in New Zealand. But we have talked about Sochi a little bit, and obviously there's some controversy surrounding it with their stance on gay rights and everything. Just what are your thoughts on Sochi as a whole? I mean, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful place, but is it going to be of any concern for these athletes on some of the instances that are taking place in Russia right now?
How impactful will it be on them? I don't know. Because, a lot of the athletes will be in the Olympic Village. They'll be isolated. They won't be really where a lot of, engagement with people who would be talking about, concerned about these things, perhaps protesting, perhaps, out there trying to, create a conversation around the issues that they have. So I don't know how impactful it'll be for the athletes. I think one of the interesting things going back to the social media is that we're able to kind of express ourselves. So I think if anything, we'll probably see some athletes, people tend to be passionate about their beliefs and things. And some of them may express their thoughts on how, how things are for, Russian citizens, I suppose. However, I don't know how. I don't know if it'll really impact the athletes. I will say though, I was a little surprised that Sochi was chosen as the destination. They're in a much more tropical climate than typically you would see winter games in, and I think that's why they're actually even starting to make snow and store snow. I read some crazy article about a month or so ago about how they're already starting to make snow and they're already pushing it up the hill so that they'll be able to ensure that they have snow for the event. Because, look what happened in 2010 with Vancouver, which, people typically think is a pretty cold place. They had snow issues. And so it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. I think, athletes might be affected a little bit if facilities or Accommodations are not up to par. I know that there's been some corruption issues as far as money associated with Sochi. So that'll be really kind of interesting to see how they deal with any shortfalls they might have. I do believe it was just a couple years ago where the Commonwealth Games had an issue where I can't remember where it was held, but all the accommodations for the athletes at that point were not ready and were definitely under standards for an international sporting event. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Very cool. You mentioned corruption in the Olympics. Hopefully that doesn't happen going forward, and hopefully you guys will be in Sochi, and it's not anything that you have to worry about. You can just enjoy the Olympic experience and kind of enjoy that. But I kind of want to jump back to the FIS Snowboard World Cup. What events are going to take place there? Is there going to be some half pipe? Is there going to be some downhill racing? What specific events are some of your athletes or as a whole going to take place down there in Cardrona, I think? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yes, Padrona, correct.
Okay.
So on our side, we're looking to qualify an athlete for slopestyle. Slopestyle is new for 2014. It's been around for quite a while. It's essentially on the X Games programming. It has been for since the get-go, I would say. And that is essentially where you have a series of jumps and rails as you move down the hillside. And your goal is to hit as many of them as you can. And, of course, have your style, your amplitude, and your ability to throw a variety of tricks within that one run. You get 2 runs. It's the best of those 2 runs, and that's how they score it. So we will be competing in the slopestyle event in New Zealand. There will also be a half-pipe event. Unfortunately, we don't have an athlete in that one, but there will be half-pipe as well. And then the third event you typically will see as well is border cross. I don't think they're doing running a border cross event in New Zealand. I think they were actually doing it in South America, but I could be wrong about that. So they sometimes they'll combine all 3. They definitely will do that at the end of the season for the World Cups that they typically have in Europe. So we'll see. But those are the 3 events that you will associate with Olympic snowboarding.
Nice. Well, what I'm seeing on their website right now is I see slopestyle and I see half pipe. So that last one you mentioned, obviously, they'll save that for later. But you do a lot of this work with the federation, but you've also got some stuff that you do on your own. Your Twitter handle is at Equipo Roca. I don't know if I'm saying that exactly like you want to, but it's at EQUIPO ROCA. So make sure to follow Juan. What else are you up to, or what else are you working on in this crazy world we call life?
A little bit of everything, and right now this year has been extremely busy for me. So essentially, when I started off, I wanted to do a consulting business that would operate in sports marketing that would focus in on the Hispanic market. I used to work at a qualitative market research firm in Boulder, Colorado, that was called Radar Communications. It was later acquired by a larger ad firm by the name of Crispin Porter and Bogusky, and kind of became their planning department. We had done a lot of up until that point. We had done a lot of interesting anthropologically driven market research, and part of my role there was working within the Hispanic space, and I just kept seeing how things were getting bigger and more influential. And so being bilingual, actually I speak Portuguese as well. So I said to myself, there's going to be a opportunity on a global scale as well as on a localized national market scale to really play in the whole Hispanic market. So I started off in 2006, and essentially I work with advertising agencies and brands on consumer research, and I'll go out in the field and talk about product, services, and how they fit into people's lives, and get kind of a contextual perspective from consumers, and essentially help brands manage that through in their system that would result in creative, whether that be digital, TV, radio, shopper marketing, anything that has a consumer-facing engagement to it. And I specialize in the Hispanic market, and let's face it, everybody's talking about it more. Everybody's interested in that space. And so I'll work on anything from automotive to technology, sports, and consumer packaged goods. So I do that on the side as well as running the Mexican snowboard program. Oh, and then I also throw in, I go to Ohio University. I'm in the professional Master Sports Administration program as well. So, and a lot of the impetus behind that decision was a result of this Mexican snowboard program, because when he's like, you can run it, I was like, sweet. But I've never run a snowboard program.
Yeah.
So, but again, you never say no to really cool, unique opportunities. And so that opened the door up to pursue a master's in sports administration out of Ohio.
Well, first, go Bobcats. Second, if anybody's interested, and like you said, it's such an interesting and growing market with the whole Hispanic marketing. Look up Juan, give him a call. He's happy to help you. But we are 182 days away. We're half a year away from the start of the Sochi Olympics. So, Juan, we all want to wish you guys the best of luck. We hope to see good things. Hopefully, we can check in with you as we progress through the season, as you're knocking down some World Cup events and qualifying athletes for the Olympics. So I want to thank Juan for joining us today. He's been a great guest. Like I said, we'll make sure to have him on soon. So check us out on Twitter at SBNow, online at sportsbusinessnow.com, and tune in next Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern, with an all-new edition of SBN Live, and Juan's Twitter account once again at Equipo Roca on Twitter.
SBN. Sports Business Now.
Juan,